Hello there, I'm Mike Glauser. I've been studying entrepreneurs for more than 20 years and studying the keys to success in building successful organizations. Today on Dov Barron's Leadership and Loyalty Show, I'm going to talk about how you can apply entrepreneurial principles to your existing organization. So stay tuned.
Congratulations! You are tuned into Dov Barron's Leadership and Loyalty Show, the #1 podcast for Fortune 500 executives and those who are dedicated to creating a quantum leap in leadership. Your host, Dov Barron, is the founder of FullMontyLeadership.com. He's an executive mentor to leaders like you, a contributing writer for Entrepreneur Magazine, CEO World, and he's been featured on CNN, Fox, CBS, and many other notable sites. Dov Barron is an international business speaker who was named by Inc. magazine as one of the top 100 leadership speakers to hire. Now, over to Dov Barron.
Welcome, dear friends, fans, and fellow aficionados of leadership excellence. Thank you for joining us today on this episode of Dov Barron's Leadership and Loyalty Tips for Executives, part of the Full Monty interview series, where today we're going to be taking an insider look at how entrepreneurship is severely threatening old school corporations and the power of entrepreneurial practices applied to the corporate environment. If you're a new listener, new viewer to the show, thank you for joining us. Strap yourself in, we're about to go full Monty. If you're a regular, big thank you to you for making us the #1 podcast globally for Fortune 500 listeners. And we're also grateful to Inc., who named us as the #1 podcast to make you a better leader. So thank you for sharing the show with everybody you know. Remember, we always need your help in staying relevant. So please get yourself over to iTunes, rate, review, and subscribe to the show. All right, let's strip it down and dive right in. As a leader, whether you're a CEO, someone in the C-suite, a sales leader, an entrepreneur, or a leader in any capacity, you are no doubt leading at least some and probably many millennials. This generation is already at their older end, in their late 30s. They're more entrepreneurial minded than any generation before. What's more, if your corporate environment restricts or restrains this entrepreneurial spirit that's within them, you're going to be losing your best people faster than you can get whiplash. So how do you find a way to tap into these millennial entrepreneurs, transform your business, and become more agile in this, the most disruptive time we've ever seen? Well, stay tuned because you're about to find out, because my guest on this episode is Michael Glauser. Mike has extensive experience, not only as an entrepreneur, but also as a business consultant and, surprisingly, a university professor. He's the co-founder and chairman of My New Enterprise, an online training and development company for aspiring entrepreneurs. He's also the founder and former CEO of Golden Swirl Management Company and of Northern Lights. Mike has consulted with hundreds of startup companies and large corporations in areas of business strategy, organization effectiveness, and leadership development. His clients include Associated Food Stores, the Boeing Company, Department of Workforce Services, Esso, Syntec Global, USANA, to name but a few. Mike is currently executive director of the Clark Center of Entrepreneurship in the John Huntsman School of Business at Utah University. He's published numerous articles in magazines and 3 books on entrepreneurship. Mike has appeared on Great Day America, First Business for Washington, Associated Press Radio, Voice America, Good Morning Chicago, Kansas City Live, and many other TV and radio programs. He received a PhD from Purdue University and a BS and an MS degree from the University of Utah. So the guy's not got much under his belt. So please put it together and welcome Mike Glauser. Welcome, my friend.
Thank you. Wow, that sounds like I'm way more important than I really am. Thanks, Glenn.
We do our best, my friend. We do our best. We want to welcome you to this show, and let's just jump right in. Who is Mike Glauser? What makes you tick? What is it that makes you tick?
My great love from the time I was a young college student was how to build organizations. For some reason, I got real excited about leadership, starting and growing new ventures. And so I thought, the way to learn about that is to go to school. So I went straight through a bachelor's degree, a master's, and a PhD, and started teaching leadership and entrepreneurship and management when I was, I think I was 27 years old. And I
Wow.
quickly realized if I wanted to really be a thought leader, if I really wanted to be smart and know what I was doing, I had to get out of academics and I had to go do the real thing. And so I stayed about 4 years in university education. And then I jumped out and spent the next 20 years starting, building, and selling companies. And so now what I'm doing is I'm trying to help other people have that same experience of really building something that's excellent, that a place where people want to work and a place where we achieve all of our goals and it's a joy to be at and the customers love the product. So, it's a quest for excellence in building organizations. That's my passion.
Fantastic. One of the things I mean, of course, I mentioned at the beginning, and I know we're going to dive right into it, but talking about this is for me, the millennials generation is the entrepreneurial generation, and I think that Gen Z, the next generation, are going to be even more so. But the
Yeah.
time we're in, big corporations are losing ground. Many of them are scaling down, closing divisions here in North America. And you speak a lot about how these big corporations can learn from entrepreneurs. But the argument for large companies is that they're big. They can't quickly pivot. Tell us some of the companies that because you've done this amazing research, and I'm going to get into that a little bit later on, but you've done this great research. Tell us about some of the companies that you've discovered that are even multi-billion-dollar companies that now play and pivot like a small startup, like an entrepreneurial operation. Tell us a little bit about some of the ones you found.
Yeah, being entrepreneurial has nothing to do with being big or being small. It's a set of practices implemented within an organization. And I have found that in the early stages of development, they have to apply these practices or they don't survive. So first survive and then thrive.
Yes.
But what happens over time is, every big corporation was started by an entrepreneur, and then they become very bureaucratic. They become ossified. They create a whole system of rules and programs and policies and budgets, and basically they leave the foundation upon which they were started. But it's been really clear to me over the last 20 years that large corporations can still be very entrepreneurial. And the one that I just love that I've done some work with is the Gore Company, W.L. Gore and Associates. And if you know that story, Bill Gore worked for DuPont, and he had this great idea for this new polymer and these new products, and they weren't interested. It's, no, we don't do that around here. So that's one of the differences is entrepreneurial companies are always looking for opportunities to expand their product line. They look at their product line more like a portfolio, and they maximize the top products, and they maintain the middle level, and they drop off those that are dying out. And so Bill Gore, what he noticed was that his very best conversations every day were in the carpool going to work and coming home from work. They were far more stimulating and motivating than being at his desk at DuPont. Right. And so his idea was to create he loved this new product, which became Gore-Tex. But what he really wanted to do is try to create a phenomenal organization where there's a lot of interaction and innovation. And so today, the Gore Company has about 8,000 associates. They do about $3 billion plus in sales. And still, one of his principles was he never wanted to put more than about 150 people in any building that he owned. So they still have all of these small facilities where teams know each other well and they work well together. They have time to innovate, create new product lines, and they've innovated thousands of products. So it's really
you'll probably remember this better than me, and I can't remember if it's the principle of 16 or 11 or 26. The number's gone out of my head for the moment, but it's the principle around team sizes, and that there's a certain size a team has to be in order to keep that entrepreneurial mindset, in order to keep that ability to pivot and to keep new ideas flowing in. And then there's a certain number where it just disappears, and it's like one over, and suddenly everybody starts going into their silos and everybody starts blocking other people and doing all that. Do you remember that number? I'm just fascinated to see.
I don't recall the research you're referring to, but I've always thought that 8 to 10, maybe 12 people. Right. And most of these large corporations that are still entrepreneurial, if you're hired on, you're part of a team, a small team. And you get some time to innovate each week in addition to the work that you're performing for that organization. And I'll give you a fun example. When I was back at Delaware with the Gore, I met some people, and this one guy was painting this polymer on bike cables. He thought, man, these bike cables will last longer if we treat them with this material. But but his team members weren't really all that interested in biking, silly guys wearing spandex and riding around on bikes. So he came back and said, well, how about if we put this on guitar strings? And now they got excited because a lot of them, were interested in music. And so maybe the story that led to the Elixir guitar string, which within a few years dominated, 50% of the world market. And so they're constantly innovating and working in these small teams. And in any one building, they might have 150, maybe 200 at most. So they kind of all know each other. So they're behaving like a very small entrepreneurial company, even though they are 3 billion with 8,000 employees.
Do you think that is easier or harder now with so many people on a team are often virtual? So, there might be 12 people in my team, might be 15, might be 30 people in my team, but, half of them might be scattered around not only North America, but maybe even around the world. Do you think it's become harder or easier or about the same?
I think it's probably about the same because people can meet in conferences and they can talk like you and I are talking today. And if we spent, a couple hours every day over a month working on projects, we would get to know each other pretty well. If you can also then get together and go do things part of the year, that helps as well. I think activities outside of work help build team spirit as well and respect for each other.
Now you did some very interesting research because I gave this great resume that you've done, but part of what I didn't talk about was this phenomenal research you did in a very odd way, and I loved it. So you took a 4,000-mile bike trip across America, and what you got to look at entrepreneurship and business and leadership. That has become a book and even a documentary or documentaries. Tell us a little bit about that and what that was about.
Right. Well, for the last 20 years, I've been collecting stories of entrepreneurs that are really changing industries and, competing well with big corporations. And I try to interview, 80 or 100 each year. And so I collect these oral histories. I have a huge database of stories from entrepreneurs where I say, tell me where the idea came from, and then tell the whole story up till today. And a few years ago, I thought, I started finding these really exciting entrepreneurs that were moving to smaller towns or staying in their hometown. And because of new technology, we can work from anywhere. But they were saying, I want lifestyle first. But because there are no jobs in these small towns, they had to create their own companies. And I found that there were hundreds of these that were growing into regional and national and international companies out of small towns like Sisters, Oregon, or Missoula, Montana, or Boulder, Colorado. And no one was hearing anything about them. The media tends to focus on the big public corporations, the Googles and the Apples and the eBays. Sure. And I thought these stories needed to be told. And so when I thought, okay, how am I gonna contact these entrepreneurs? I thought, if you're studying big corporations, you'd get on airplanes and you'd, go to chain hotels and sleep in chain hotels and eat in chain restaurants. So I thought it'd be really fun to go slow and to actually see their counties and their post offices and their cities and their places of business. So I thought, why don't I get on a bicycle and ride across America and find these people that are amazing role models that can teach us a lot about how to manage and lead, but that nobody knows about. And so I spent about 45 days on a bike seat and rode from the Pacific Ocean in Oregon to the Atlantic Ocean in Yorktown, Virginia. And I'd ride almost 100 miles a day, between 80 and 120 miles a day. And then I'd interview a couple of entrepreneurs along the way with a film crew that followed me. And so that's where the documentary is coming from, is from that experience. It turned into a book, and it's now going to be a documentary that'll be finished at the end of this year.
That's amazing. So aside from learning that you get a very sore butt from riding that much, what was the number one lesson you learned from all these entrepreneurs? Because, like I said, I find it very fascinating that, these were entrepreneurs who were, as you said, they're not in New York, they're not in San Francisco, they're not in, LA or the big city, Chicago, the big cities we think of generally. They're in these small cities and towns that you talked about. I really would like to know what was the biggest learning you got from them as a collective for yourself?
Well, when we finished this tour, I did a lot of media interviews, and they always ask me that question, what's the biggest thing that you learned? And
Hmm.
I really can honestly say that this reinforced my belief that anybody can start and build a successful business. There are principles we now know that work, that are present in successful startups that are not there in startups that fail. And if people learn those principles and they build upon those principles as a foundation, instead of a 50-50 chance for success, their success rate goes up to, I think, 80 or 90%. And so
Wow.
we met people that were just everyday American men and women like you and I. I think only nine of the 100 had any business training whatsoever, and none of them had any training in entrepreneurship. And they built these phenomenal companies. Some are small, but some are quite large and have 60 or 80 or 100 employees. And they're doing, a million to 10 or 20 million in sales. And they're living the life of their dreams. And I'm just very convinced that if you study the practices and implement those practices, you can build a successful organization.
So they're sourcing their people locally, obviously, I'm guessing, if they're out in the middle of, wherever it might be.
Yeah. Yeah. In fact, one of the things we found is that they are very, very purpose driven. They are engaged in something they love, and money is secondary. Not one of these 100 people said, I'm doing this to make money or a lot of money. And one of the things we kept hearing is, I want to create jobs in this town.
Right.
So we met a fellow, Richard Shavs, in Baker City, Oregon. His goal is to create 100 jobs in the city that he grew up in that he loves. And when we interviewed him, he'd created 70 jobs in that small town.
That's amazing, eh?
And others, wanted to pursue a passion. Some wanted to solve problems. Some wanted to give better customer service than anybody else. So they all had this driving, powerful purpose that was keeping them alive. A strong purpose. It gets you through the hard times.
Absolutely.
If you're just seeking money, financial gain, you give up too easy. You give up too early. And then they were attracting people to their team that believed in that same purpose, that said, hey, I want to get involved in this. I love what you're doing. And then even more interesting is then customers would say, I love this. I love this business. These guys are awesome. They're doing some great things in our town, and we want to patronize them. So purpose is very, very powerful. And that's the first thing that we noticed is they were pursuing something that they were so engaged in that they could get up at 4 a.m. and work all day, and it didn't seem like work.
Yeah. You talked about these principles that if we follow them, we've got instead of a 50-50 chance with a startup, we go to 80-90% startup. And, one of those principles, of course, as you know, Mike, because you've been through some of my stuff too, is purpose. I'm all
Yeah.
about purpose. The companies of, we work with leaders to help them find their purpose. We help with companies to help them find their purpose. We call it soul purpose, getting to the real depth, not just your simple why, but the why of your why. The
Yeah.
interesting thing about that is what I found interesting about it was what you said about uh, when people work on purpose, they often work much longer hours, but it doesn't feel like work.
Yeah.
And the other thing that I think we need to come back to was the resourcefulness of it, because I think that there's two ways to look at the world of business. Wow, there's a phenomenal opportunity right here, and then you want to jump on that because this is, we can see this as an emerging market. And then over here this is what lights my fire. And I've got
Right.
to find a way for that. Now, if you obviously, ideally, put the two things together, ideally, that's fantastic. But in your tour, in your experience, in your research there, did you find anybody who sort of had that purpose, were connected deeply to what it was, and there seemed to be no emerging market for it, but they made it work? And if there was, tell us how they did it.
Well, I have hundreds of stories I can
I'm
tell,
sure.
but I'll tell you just one or two that there was a couple, Benny and Julie Benson. They are engineers, and they graduated from college and moved to LA, and they both got jobs in LA working as engineers. And Benny said he was committed to be a phenomenal employee, so he wanted to get to work early his first day. So he left 2 hours early, and he got on the LA freeways, and he arrived 15 minutes late to work.
Yes, That's
And
LA.
within a few months, he and his wife said, you know what, we're not going to do this. So they moved. They got in their car and drove up and down the coast, and they discovered Sisters, Oregon, and said, we're moving here. And 10 days later, they had moved there, quit their jobs and moved there.
Wow.
Okay, so it's a beautiful, beautiful city at the base of the mountains. If you've ever been there, 2,000 people. And they said, okay, we got to find something to do here. And so they said, well, what do we know? Well, we know engineering. And one of their specialties was designing biomass power plants. And so they started looking for clients, and they could do that from Sisters, Oregon. And they built a clientele and were doing very well. And then the next thing they noticed was that their customers were saying, hey, these are pretty unique plants. We have a hard time finding people to build them. So they said, great, we'll start building them. So then they launched a construction division. So now they're designing the plants, and then they're building the plants. And then their customers said, you know, it's really hard for us to monitor the output of these plants. So they said, no problem. And they developed a suite of software to manage those plants remotely from Sisters, Oregon. So now they provide a complete solution to customers from a teeny town. They design the plants, they build the plants, they monitor the plants. And then they were flying in and out of the airport so much in Sisters, they bought the airport. And then next they put up some offices for other entrepreneurs. So they have real estate. And so they've just figured out things to do to meet needs from a place that they want to live. And so I believe that, you know, if we look at what we're passionate about, if you ever take those interest tests that are offered at universities, you know, employment centers, you'll find you're pretty interested in 3 or 4 or 5 things. You're not just interested in one thing.
No.
So what you have to do is say, of these things I'm pretty passionate about, which ones line up best with job opportunities? And so that's one of the principles, is that these entrepreneurs pivot to multiple revenue streams. They don't get locked in to say, this is what we do and this is the only thing that we do. They're constantly looking for new opportunities based on customer solutions, whole solutions to customers.
But you know, it's a very interesting thing you brought up there, because you and I are both business consultants, and there is a mantra inside of that world, and I know you know it as well as I do, which is find your niche, serve your niche. You know, and it's just this tiny, find this one little thing, and I've got to be honest that drives me freaking crazy, because there's no way in the world that I can limit myself to one little thing. There are many aspects of what I do, and to say, yeah, you know, I can help you come up with your purpose statement, that's true, but it's so one factor. And it seems like that's what you're saying is actually at the depth of entrepreneurship, is the ability to pivot, the ability to recognize and even value the multiple levels of passion and purpose and connection you've got to different things.
Yeah, I think the essence of leadership is creating vision, creating a powerful vision of where we want to go. And that vision has to be really exciting. Mm-hmm. So we're at point A today, and we're going to point B. Point B is up here, but it's really cool, and we're gonna get there. And then for people on a team to see movement towards that vision becoming a reality, to me, is one of the most powerful ways to motivate people and to have them be included in the journey.
Right.
And so I think that if you have a broader vision, you paint a broad vision that, like Apple does, we want to think differently and create products that make people's lives better. So they're not hemmed into any unique little niche. They do computers, they do music, they do cell phones, they got other things coming. And so they're within that exciting area of thinking differently and making lives better. And, you know, same with like a company like Patagonia. They're all about finding solutions to the environment.
Yes.
And so there's a whole array of products that you can develop within that broader vision.
Right.
And so, you know, another fun story is this family, the Williams family, they were on a trip from California up through Idaho, and they discovered a beautiful, beautiful mountain ridge above Grangeville, Idaho, and they decided they wanted to raise their kids on that mountain. And so they moved there. And again, what are they going to do? Well, she had been sewing leather seat covers for truckers in their trucks. And she said, I know how to sew. So she went to the Sun Valley Ski Resort and said, let me recover all your tower pads and your lift pads on your seats. And they said, great, we've been thinking they need to be recovered. And so that was her first client of now 600 ski resorts worldwide they service from this little mountain factory above Grangeville, Idaho. So that was they were into padding, that's what they knew. But then they said, okay, who else needs padding? And they realized, well, the military needs padding. And then they realized colleges and high schools need padding for their high jump pits and for, their hockey arenas. And so they've now pivoted into a whole bunch of different markets around the concept of padding. But they're not just doing one thing. They have a whole portfolio of products and clients in a variety of industries. So the way most of these entrepreneurs pivot is first thing they say is, we built this base of customers that love us. What else might they need to solve their problem? So they add more products to the same customers. So they raise the ticket price to those customers. And then the second move is, okay, we've got all these products. Now, what other markets might need these products?
Right.
So they continue to diversify, kind of following those concepts, those principles.
One of the principles of entrepreneurship, for me, when I look at it, is courage. I think, you said it very well earlier on. I think that when we start a company and we're in that startup phase, I've talked a lot about this myself from the stage, is that we start off, there's usually 2, 3, 5 people max in the beginning, and we're all sort of jumping in, and we're, everybody's swapping hats and adding new hats and doing multiple hats, doing all kinds of stuff. And, and we grow. We do amazing things. We bang up against walls. We do all kinds of things, but we grow. And then there's this influx of cash, usually some venture capital or whatever it might be. The company takes off like a freaking rocket. Everybody continues to juggle all the hats because it's round one. And then there's so much money coming in and so much business coming in that everybody goes, oh my God, we don't have any systems. Then they start putting the systems together, and in the process, very often suffocate the creativity, suffocate the multiple hats, and give everybody a frickin' role, and now everybody's jammed down.
Yeah, they kill innovation as you ossify and become bureaucratized.
Right. So when I'm looking at those organizations, one of the things that I like to bring them back to is exactly what we've been talking about, which is purpose. How would, for our viewers, our listeners who are tuning in right now, one of the things I've talked a lot about is the confusion between your passion, your mission, and your purpose. How would you separate those things? Because I think that those things get mixed up, not vision so much, but passion, mission, and purpose. I think they get mixed up, and people go, well, we found our purpose. And I go, no, that's your mission, or that's what you're passionate about. But that's not your purpose. Tell us how you would define the separation there into purpose.
Yeah, I think the mission, as I define it with my clients, the mission is why you exist. Why are you in business? Why did you do this? What are you trying to solve? What are you trying to accomplish? And so that's quite broad. Mm-hmm. And then your vision is more a painting of where you want to be in a period of time, 3 years, 5 years. So when I work with companies on mission, I really have them focus on why they're doing what they're doing, because they have to be able to communicate that to their team members and to their customers. Some are good at creating missions, but they're not good at communicating that to their customers. Absolutely. And then the vision, what I say is, if an architect was to design a beautiful building, he would create a rendering of what that would look like, and then we would go build that. So your vision is more, how big do you want to be? What kinds of products do you want to have? How many employees do you want to have? And then I think the mission and that vision really create the passion. The passion flows from those two. We're excited, like I said, to go from point A to point B, and point B is really, really exciting. So as a university professor, I've taught all the theories of motivation, and they're fine, they're academic. But to me, the greatest motivation, again, is movement towards something that's exciting, something where people want to go.
But I think where the confusion comes for a lot of people is they think that their passion is their purpose, and the analogy that I often like to use with people is that passion is transitory. Passions come and go. If I had built a business on what I was passionate about at 15, I'd be in the gynecology business, or the bra fitting business, right? I'm not in those businesses, but that was certainly my passion. Purpose, on the other hand.
Yeah, passion comes and goes. And if you
Right.
lose it, you got to go find it or find something else you're passionate
Right, and
about.
you got to, and it's okay that it transforms and it becomes something else. But purpose is this deeper thing. Now, here's one of the things I want to put forward to you, because for me, this is when I look at the companies that have succeeded from a deeper place, and it's the work that we do, that we go in and do, is to look at the reason. When you want to find out what your purpose is, what you actually have to do is look into the depth of this, and that is, what is the pain that you have suffered, or that people you know and love have suffered? Because that very often is the catalyst. So it can be a past pain, or it can be a present pain. You know, you talked about these people who were saying, you know what, the pain is that I don't want to live in LA. I don't want to battle traffic for 2 hours. Or the pain is, oh my God, my town is going down the toilet. There's no jobs, and I want to create something. I want to create something that creates a job, that creates, and there we tie in our passion and what it is that our skills are.
Right.
What's your sense on that?
Well, yeah, any great company that survives that I've worked with, it's been hundreds of them, they've started off with a pain point, either in a marketplace or within themselves. There's something that isn't right, something that isn't working. And the most successful entrepreneurs work in the field and see this from being in an industry.
Yeah.
They see it within themselves, in their own hearts. They see it, in the industry that they work in. The idea that I'm going to quit a job and go be an entrepreneur and start a business, now what should I do? And I'm going to start a restaurant is ridiculous. The failure rate is so high for that reason. But we found on this bike tour that the most successful entrepreneurs that we interviewed had worked in an industry and seen a real problem they wanted to solve. Then they got excited about that problem. Or they were serious and frequent users of the product. They were product users. And they knew all the brands and they knew who was making what. And they saw that there was a problem there. Their need wasn't being met by what was available as a customer. Yeah. In fact, this is interesting. You'll find this fascinating. The Kauffman Foundation has done a recent study. They show that about maybe 15 or 20% of new business launches are started by user entrepreneurs that have never worked in the industry. Huh. But after 5 years, 47% of those that survive come from that group of user entrepreneurs. So the idea is that, you need to be out in that marketplace and you need to see customers and the competitors and the chaos of the marketplace, and you need to know what's working and what's not working. The idea that you can manage from an ivory tower and get market information up through 5 levels in a hierarchy is kind of a ridiculous business concept we've created over the last 80 years. So these people, Sarah Blakely is a great example, who started Spanx. She was really frustrated. Yeah. Every time she put on a pair of pantyhose, it would create a muffin top because they were so tight and they were low riding on her waist. Yeah. And then she found out that all of her friends had that problem and they just were uncomfortable with how they looked. So she started buying pantyhose, cutting them up, sewing them together, giving them to her friends, till she got one that came up a little higher that was flattering to her and all of her friends. And then she sold $1 million account to Neiman Marcus while she still had her day job.
That's amazing, huh?
So
that's a great story.
Her purpose was, man, I'm going to solve this problem of women feeling uncomfortable and create some great shapewear that makes us look better. Fantastic. And she had that problem and no one else was solving it in that industry, and all of her friends had that problem. And so that purpose then to create beautiful things for women that were comfortable is what has
driven out of her pain or her own frustration. And I think that's always so key for people. Now, you have we're going to call it a business, I use this in broad terms. You have a business program that you run at the university, right? And I want you to talk about it because, you got to tear down the academic program that was already there. You were given full permission to do it your own way. And it's a very different program. You and I talked about it off air, and I thought it was fascinating. Tell us about the university program that you run and why it's so different.
Well, we are the John Huntsman School of Business at Utah State University, and Mr. Huntsman, the founder of the Huntsman Corporation, has given us very generous grants, millions of dollars, to build a world-class program. He wants it to be a top-tier program, and one of his requirements for the donations has been we got to we got to really focus on entrepreneurship, business building, job creation. So there's been a ton of support for that. Obviously, you have support when you get money. And so what we did is we said, okay, what do entrepreneurs actually do to build businesses? And we looked at these hundreds of oral histories we've collected, and we created 30 concepts or modules from A to Z that if you're starting a business, this is what you do first, this is what you do second, and so on and so forth. And then we created a series of courses around those real world experiences. And we've filmed all these entrepreneurs, so we've created online tools where the students are taught by the entrepreneurs, not a boring professor in front of a blackboard. And they learn how, and they have to build something while they're in the courses. It's not academic theory and research. It's a 6-course sequence in how to start and build your own business. And so they build, instead of going to school and then on the side at night trying to build a business, they build a business for school, and they get credit for doing that. And so we've had, 100 plus companies come out of the center, and some are multi-million-dollar businesses started by young kids. I meet with them all the time. They're still in their 20s, and they're doing 8 million or 10 million or 6 million in sales. I met with 2 ladies yesterday, 2 young women that are doing 1.3 million.
Nice.
So it's a very practical program around what do you actually do in the field to build something. And we've made this available to students from every single major across the university. So the engineering students can take it, the science students, the music students, the landscape architects. It's not just for business students. And about half of our students in the program are not business students.
That's what I loved about it when you were telling me about it, was that the people who are actually taking the program don't have to be enrolled in business. They can be enrolled in the arts. They can be enrolled in anything. But what a great skill set for, the fact that I'm in, something that's in the arts, or I'm in cooking, or I'm in something that doesn't appear to be business. But I think, if you can get those business basics, and you actually know, here's the map that you've outlined to become entrepreneurial business person, and you can follow that map and apply that to the thing that you're passionate about, you have a business. And
Yeah.
I think that is so wonderful, because I think that when people think about going to business school, they think about the dry, the boring, as you said, the professor at the front of the room with a blackboard who's going to tell me the business theories of economics and all that kind of stuff that I really don't give a crap about, and I'm not going to give a crap about 5 seconds after I leave the class, and certainly not 5 minutes into my business.
Yeah.
Right? So that's what I loved about what you were telling me about the program. And you also bring in, as you said, you've got these entrepreneurs, and you bring in speakers, and it's a very different style.
Yeah, we bring an entrepreneur to campus every Wednesday. And the first few years, I was begging my friends to come and talking people into it. Now I get calls constantly, people that say, I want to come. We're booked out for a full year, I told you, of people that have volunteered to come, that want to be part of the program and interact with these students. And so it's been really, I told the dean, he said, I want you to come build this Center for Entrepreneurship and comply with, Mr. Huntsman's desire to really be excellent in that space. And I said, okay, I think it'll take 3 years, maybe 5 at max to do this. And I'm just starting year number 7. So that's how much I enjoy it, being there.
Right. Now you've obviously had a lot of success in your own life. You've grown all kinds of things. Like I said, you got your PhD, but you've also grown multiple businesses. You've sold them. You've done all kinds of things. And as you may know, but certainly as many of my listeners and viewers know, that back in 1990, I had a fall. Mine was quite literal. I fell off a mountain, got smashed to pieces, and had to rebuild myself. But one of the things I've said for years is I believe that we all go through falls. And the fall is, sometimes it's a bankruptcy, sometimes it's a divorce, sometimes it's a horrible diagnosis or the loss of a loved one, or a myriad other things that can create the fall that takes us down. What was yours? Have you had a fall? What was it that knocked you down? And how did you get better? How did you get back?
Well, I've certainly had my share of those, and it's ironic that the things that teach us the most in life are the hard things. We don't learn a lot from the easy times when we're real successful.
No.
And one of the businesses I built in the kind of the health food space, we were growing at about 50 to 100% a year. And I had some investors that I love. These are my friends. They put several $1,000,000 into this business, and we were just, things were booming. And then suddenly they went flat, and then same store sales started to drop, and just the anxiety of the fear that you might lose the money that these people have invested in this business, and you may not. We had 500 employees, and that your managers and your employees may not have work. Really caused a lot of sleepless nights, and we had to really think through what else can we do with this business to pivot, to get our sales back up, and to launch it to a new height. Yeah. And it was a couple of really painful years, and so we kind of completely reinvented the brand, and we moved from retailing into wholesaling, and got our sales back up, and eventually were purchased by a public company. But that struggle with, what do you do when something that you thought was working so well suddenly isn't working all that well, and the reinvention of a business, and being intimate with your customers and having them help you design what you're going to do next. I just learned a ton from that experience.
So how was that a turning point in your life, in your leadership, and in your business philosophy?
Well, at the same time, I started doing this research on entrepreneurs, and I started seeing how flexible they were and how quickly they were pivoting before they had to pivot. And it was interesting that the typical startup pivots 2 to 3 times before it even gains traction. So I do my homework, I do my research, I launch something, and then it doesn't quite work. I have to go back to the drawing board with new pricing, new packaging, maybe a new niche market. And so you learn to scramble, and you keep working until something gains traction. And so rather than longer term planning, where I've got a 5-year plan, I'm going to stick to that, I started creating annual execution plans. I had a bigger vision of what I wanted the company to be generally, but it really changed. My planning is all about planning for opportunities. So I don't know right now, today, what I might discover next week in terms of new competition, new technology, new products. And so you're really scanning that environment and looking for the next opportunity, and you're adding new products to your product line long before you have to. I think that's how it changed how I view leadership.
So tell us a little bit about that. Planning for opportunity. That's an interesting concept. Tell us what you mean by that.
Well, I think that, when I started my career, people were creating 10-year business plans. Some were creating 20-year business plans. Some were creating 5-year plans.
Some creating 100-year plans.
Yeah, and things are just changing so fast, so rapidly, that if you get too strict, too ossified in a certain path, you miss out on things. It's like I can't tell you how many entrepreneurs I've interviewed. Like Bill Gore's an example. He takes a product to DuPont, and they say, "We don't do that around here." Right. Well, other customers were asking for something new, and the company's reaction is, "We don't do that." And you look at the founders of Apple and Hewlett Packard's argument that no one's going to want desktop computers, no one's going to want home personal computers.
No.
And so
nobody will need that.
This is the principle I'll share with you. I call it living in the boundary.
Okay, tell us about it.
Think of the pyramidal bureaucracy. Okay, it's a pyramid, and your executive team's at the very top. And down at the bottom, you have your front line, and they interact with customers every single day. And they know what customers are saying. They know what customers are missing. They know what they're wanting. And if they try to communicate that up, it usually doesn't get up the hierarchy, or if it does, it gets severely distorted. And the decision makers at the top don't see it firsthand, so they don't think it's important. And if you take any organization, the people on the front line are usually the lowest paid and the least respected people in the organization, but they have all the knowledge. They have the industry knowledge of how competitors and customers are interacting in a marketplace. So take hospitals. The nurses know more about patients and families than the doctors do. And in schools, it's the teachers that know more than the administrators. And so when I say live in the boundary, I teach executives to spend at least half their time out in the field. If you're a decision maker, you're going to create strategy, you better be out in that field interacting firsthand with your customers and your competitors and your employees in that marketplace and seeing it firsthand. So, take the show Undercover Boss. I'm fascinated by every time the show ends, the CEO goes, "I had no idea that was going on." And I go,
Exactly.
why didn't you know that was going on? You're the CEO of the company.
Yeah.
And so in my company, I required my executive team to work out in the field and not just show up in stores and hang out occasionally, but to schedule themselves on the work schedule and go out and work and do what employees who interact with the consumers do. And so I think the most successful, this is one thing that big corporations can do to get back to their entrepreneurial roots, is their CEOs, if you're involved in making strategic decisions, you need to be out in the field getting firsthand information about your customers, your competitors in that marketplace.
You know, you said something I think is very important there, I think is missed, is that very often um, a lot is lost in translation. So even if you've created quote unquote, which I think is a terrible term because it's so misunderstood, but if you've created an open door policy, you know, first of all, does the person have the courage to cross that door frame, to cross that line? Even if your door's open, if you bark at them and you're impatient, then the door can be open as much. You'll take the wall away, it won't matter. People are not going to cross it.
Right.
Furthermore, even if they do, they're afraid to jump the line because, you know, they might get shit from the person that they directly report to, that they jumped over them and went straight to the CEO, and so they could get fired. So they just go, oh, no, I'm not going to do it. And I think this is what you're saying. There's this dilution. Everything's get diluted as we get further along. We lose more and more of that raw material that is right there. I mean, I've said for years, you know, in branding, I always say, who is the best representation of your brand? And people will say, well, you know, we have this character in our commercials, and we have, you know, the CEO does interviews. I go, no, that's not the best representation of your brand. The best representation of your brand is the person you pay the minimum wage to, who picks up a phone and says, hi, welcome, you know, thanks for calling ABC Inc. And if that person on the other end is nasty, then I hold the image that your company is nasty. Not that
Yeah.
the person who answered the phone's nasty, your company's nasty. And I
Right.
think that it's the same way the other way around, which is those people have, you know, like maybe they're nasty because they can never answer the damn question because you don't provide this thing that everybody's asking for, and nobody's listening to them saying, hey, I get crap for this every day. Can we
Yeah.
do something about this?
Yeah. Yeah.
Fascinating, huh?
Yeah.
So much
Exactly
is
right.
missed.
So I have this concept that I teach where I draw a pyramid, you know, on the board or on a slide, and then I draw like a round pizza, and I say the new corporate model needs to be round like this pizza with slices, and these slices are rolls. And if you're making strategic decisions, you need to be on the edge. You need to be one of those people on the crust or the edge of the pizza, where you're in the boundary, where the organization interacts with the environment, with the marketplace. And, you know, think of the great leaders. Sam Walton spent 3 days every week out in the field in his stores and in his competitors' stores. I've worked with Associated Foods, and the CEO gets on his Harley and he goes to the grocery stores and he parks out in front and he bags groceries all day long, talks to customers and employees. And so, you know, business is all about selling a product or service to individuals. And if you're 5 levels removed from that process, you're just not in a good position to create new products or new strategies or new services or whatever. And so it's a whole new way of looking at organizations. That's one of the things we implement is let's change how we're spending our time in the executives. If we're executives, let's change how we spend our time and how we view our role.
Yeah, and asking is, I mean, I think it's important to ask the frontline person, what would they tell you the customer wants? Right?
Yeah.
That is vital. What do the customers want? And we do the market research and we do all these things but in fact you don't need to do all that. Just listen would be a really good idea. Now,
Yeah.
as we're sort of
We,
moving towards the end of the show, I want to bring some things in because you know we talked about your falls, and I think that it's important for everybody to grasp that nobody makes it alone, and B, nobody makes it without a lot of bruises. You know, we all look at these overnight successes, but what we forget to notice is there's 10 years often in the in the dust of that.
yeah.
I believe that the people who really succeed in anything are obsessed. And I know we have a lot of negativity around obsessed, but when I say obsessed, I mean if there's a conversation going on about that subject and it's not with you, you will have to sort of move across the room. You have to go get in on that conversation. If there's a book, about it, you have to read it. If there's a movie and it's got something in it about the thing that you're obsessed, that's probably the part of the movie you're going to talk about. What is Mike Glauser obsessed with?
Well, it's the same thing I was obsessed with, early in my career. Is the idea of building organizations that meet needs in communities, that are fabulous places to work, that have high levels of satisfaction, is my driver. The challenge of doing that with humans is so enjoyable to me. It's so exciting,
Right.
and I think we can create really satisfying places to work and really effective organizations in achieving our goals. And I think we can enhance people's quality of life by creating these great organizations where they become part of the team. They get to experience the entrepreneurial ride with you. They get to be part of the planning, and they get to be part of the implementation, and they get to share in the rewards. So creating great organizations. I guess I'm really competitive. I guess I'm real competitive. I always wanted to be the best. I wanted to have people look at us and go, "Who are those guys? How do they do that?" And I wanted to be the envy of the industry.
Fantastic.
Products, services, and organizational structures and procedures and processes. And so that's what I think a lot about. Right now, I'm taking all this data that I've gathered for 20 years about how entrepreneurs succeed and really working to apply it to existing corporations to determine whether we can make big, stodgy bureaucracies entrepreneurial again. And I'm convinced we can, but it has to start at the very highest level with the CEO and the board and the executive team. And they have to say, we're ready to change this organization, and we want to go back to our entrepreneurial roots, and we're going to implement some practices that we've long forgotten and that are working in smaller companies.
So the new book is actually about each of these principles that you've been talking about and applying those into existing businesses and new businesses, right?
Yeah, the new project, I'm doing a lot of research now to find the best big corporations that are applying the same entrepreneurial principles as the exciting entrepreneurial ventures, and then trying to teach people how to actually lead like an entrepreneur.
Lead like an entrepreneur. Very, very cool. So let me ask you, what is it that keeps you up at night? What is it that scares the crap out of you? Because I think we've all got that fire too.
I've had a long, successful career, and I'm getting towards the end of my career. And to be honest with you, I've just quit worrying about things. I do the very best I can. I have specific goals. Every day I get up, I know what I want to accomplish that day. I know some will work really well. I know that we'll see some detours and have some problems. And so I tend to look at challenges and problems as an opportunity to grow and learn from and take things away from. And so I don't get too worked up about big problems or challenges. I probably worry more about my kids and grandkids than anything.
So what if you were to say whatever it is for you, because it might be different to anybody else, what is it that keeps you centered? What is it that, I call it your touchstone. What is your touchstone? What's the anchor when the feces hits the fan? What do you hold on to?
I started off setting, 8 or 10 goals every year, and then 4 or 5, and then 2 or 3. And I've told my wife this year, the one thing that is real important to me is I've got a little sign that says, "Don't be a jerk." I really want to be a decent person, and I want people to say, maybe Mike wasn't the smartest guy, but he was really a decent person.
Right. I think that's a very decent goal to have, and unfortunately an extraordinarily rare one. You've done hundreds of interviews. You probably can't even count how many you've done. You've been on all kinds of shows that we talked about right at the beginning. But what's the one thing that hosts just don't ask you, but you wish they would?
I think that I seldom get asked about I'm always interviewed about business topics and entrepreneurship topics, startup topics. And very few people ask me about, your life outside of work and how important is it, and do you plan for it, and what role does it play in your success? And I just think that we all need a break from work. I think we need to work hard and play hard, and I think we need to have things to look forward to. So all through my career, I've seen, entrepreneurs burn out and spend 70, 80 hours a week working, and I think we can work more effectively. And I've always had a big adventure to look forward to, like the bike ride across America. That was an adventure we planned for almost 3 years. And this last year, my wife and I, we just ran the Inca Trail Marathon, and we worked for that, hiking and climbing and running at elevation all year long. And then we went and, climbed the Inca Trail Marathon. It was 26 miles through the Andes Mountains. And so that kept us excited and gave us something to train for a year. And so I've always had something going on that is really exciting to me, that is a kind of a big adventure that I could couple with my work. So I could work hard and then I could go play hard. It's like, driving your car down the freeway and going 85 miles an hour forever and never putting it in neutral and giving it a break. And I think it's really rejuvenate us and refresh us and get us even more excited to come back to our passion at work.
So what's your next big adventure, Mike?
We're probably going to do the rim to rim run in the Grand Canyon next year. So it's a 50-mile run from the north rim of the Grand Canyon to the south rim and then back in one day.
Holy moly, that is some serious, and that's not exactly easy terrain.
It's
pretty
awesome.
Adventurous, my man. That's awesome.
I love endurance fitness. I think there's an analogy
I guess
here.
that. I got that.
I love learning what the body's actually capable of, and it's capable of way more than we think.
Right.
And like this bike ride across America, if you would have asked me 5 years ago if I could ride a bike 100 miles a day for 4,000 miles, I would have, asked you what you'd been smoking that day.
Exactly. But, as you said, it's a great analogy for entrepreneurship, which is that endurance that so often is missed, and so often people, especially today, we see the unicorns, we see the companies that go from nothing to massive, but we forget how that is a 1 in a 1 million, maybe, maybe even fewer than that. And realizing that it is endurance, it is patience, it is commitment, it is the tipping point that comes after the 10 years that so few understand. And I think it's a great analogy, whether it's the rim to rim or the cycling across America. I think it's a great analogy.
Yeah, I think what we've learned is on this bike ride that, you'd get up in the morning and you could barely even get out of bed. You were so sore. And if you start thinking about that and thinking how you had, 43 more days doing that, you deteriorate quickly. So rather than asking each other, how do you feel? We started asking each other, how are you thinking? And then we'd think like, yeah, we can go slow today. We can stop for lunch. If we need to take a break, we'll take a break. And we're just going to get through today and enjoy it. And we started thinking more optimistically. And so endurance fitness really teaches you a lot in life, because you find something you're passionate about, you prepare for it, and then you commit to it and you do it. You get it done. And you hang in there and you figure out how to get through it. If it's killing you, you figure out how to get through it.
That's very good. So tell us, as we finish up here, what is the most practical thing that a leader can do with what you've shared today? That you want them to sort of go away and go, okay, I'm going to go away and do this. What is that thing, Michael?
I think it's probably what we talked about being out in the field and working with your getting close to your customers, developing intimate relationships with your customers, finding out exactly how your products are being received and how they're comparing with other products and what's missing. And I say create customers as partners. We had a customer group that we met with every month. We had groups in Phoenix and Salt Lake City and Las Vegas and California, and we would introduce our products to them and have them critique those products and compare them to other products. And we never went to production until they agreed. 70% of the people said, "You've got it now. This is great. I want it. It's good." And so, you just have to quit there's levels of customer service, and the ultimate level is to actually include them in the development of the business. Be out there with them, have them dictate to you what they need and what they want, have them be close and feel like your company is their company.
Great insight. Great. Michael, thank you so much. It's been wonderful having you here. I appreciate your amazing wisdom and your phenomenal background. It's been joyous and very revealing and insightful. Thank you so much for joining us today.
It's been so great to be with you. I've really enjoyed our discussion.
Thank you. Please tell our viewers, our listeners, where they can find out more about you, your books, and all the different things that you offer, because I know you've got a massive resource. Tell people where they can reach out to you.
I think the best place to start is just my own personal website. It's mike@mikeglauser.com.
Okay. Mike, yeah, we will definitely we'll post that URL.
Articles, they can find all those things there.
So mike@mikeglauser is your email, and it's mikeglauser.com is where you find it. As I said, we'll post the URL for that and the spelling and the rest of it, so it'll be easy for you to find. Again, we want to thank you for joining us today. It's been a true pleasure. Thank you, sir. And I want to thank you, dear listener, dear viewer, for tuning in. Remember, the research consistently shows that one of the biggest challenges facing even the most successful companies is somewhat counterintuitive in that the fastest growing companies often hit a point where they realize that they're spending a fortune on attracting, training, and developing top talent, and then having them leave them at an alarming rate. If you're sick of investing in training and developing your talent only to have them leave you before you get your return on investment, then reach out to talk to us at fullmontyleadership.com, where we provide the essential leadership skills to rekindle and amplify your hidden loyalty assets in your organization through tapping into your purpose. fullmontyleadership.com, providing you with the concrete soft skills to get you and your organization to the top and keep you there. Why? Well, it's simple. You can't outsource authenticity. Remember to stop by the Matrix, matrix.fullmontyleadership.com, matrix like the movie, .fullmontyleadership.com, and get your authentic leadership matrix self-assessment tool. It's valued at $197. You get it absolutely free for being tuned in, for being a listener, being a viewer of our show. Again, matrix.fullmontyleadership.com. Until next time, this is Dov Barron saying, stay curious, my friend, stay curious about how you can tap into your entrepreneurial spirit and run your business a little closer to the customer than to the boardroom. Till next time, this is Dov Barron, and I am out.